Okay, Rabbi.
Bevakasha.
Okay, so I want to dedicate today's share memory of Racheli Deichman Wiener, who unfortunately passed away a week ago after giving childbirth. It was very like a real big tragedy. A good friend of the family and a good friend of Torah in Motion. So we want to dedicate the share in her memory and pray that the family has no more sorrow. And Baruch Hashem, they have a lot of friends, and hopefully will continue and take care of all the children and everything. Okay. And we also have to pray for our soldiers and our pilots and the joke in Israel this week was Shabbat ki tisa with a spelling tisa, like with the top with the tet instead of a taf, with a samach, tisa like a flight with airplanes. That was the what's up joke going around. Okay, so let's get started. What are we doing? Today we're finally gonna do the topic which we almost got to 3 weeks in a row. Because we're doing Shavuot, we're doing the holidays and more, and I'm trying to explain how they fit with the wider theme of Chumash, not only the wider theme of Sefer Vayikra, but the wider theme of Chumash, and we talk about the number seven. So to understand this week's parsha, I have to go back and do a quick review of creation, and we'll see. Let me share my source sheet real fast. Share screen. What happened here? There we go. Share screen. And here's my source sheet. Here we go. Okay. So this week we continue our study of the holidays in Parshat in Sefer Vayikra and Parshat Damor, and we're going to mention Pesach briefly and talk about Shavuot and the 7 weeks between Pesach and Shavuot, which we're all familiar with, called the time of the Omer. And we decided about we had our subunits in Second of Vayikra we talked about last week, and I meant not to copy that. Okay, that was from last week. Here we have to review. What we're going to do today is we're going to review the biblical history of Shabbat, not just seven, but the 7 days of creation in chapter 1 of Breshit, beginning of chapter 2. The story of the man will be our main focus today, and Sefer Shmo, because that'll be the background to understand Sfirat Omer. And then we'll quickly talk about the mitzvah of Shabbat in chapter 20 and 23 in Sefer Shmot. And then we'll see Shmot several times, Shabbat several times in Sefer Shmot, and that'll help us understand what's going on in Vayikra. So we're going to start with a quick discussion of Breshit Aleph, and we did this share probably a couple years ago, but just for a quick reminder, it goes like this. In the 7 days of creation, or 6 days of creation, whatever you want to call it, every day begins with Vayomer Elokim. I have this little chart here. Again, that's not our topic today, just a quick reminder. Every day of creation, the 6 days of creation, begin in the same format. God says he's going to do something. He has a command. He executes the command, like Vayomer Vayior. That's a short version. And he evaluates. And everything God does is good. But in every day of creation, God creates something that didn't exist before. Before creating, he thinks about it. And the last thing that God makes on day 6, he makes man in God's image, B'Tselem Elokim. And what we suggested is, what's Elokim been doing for the last 6 days? Planning to do something, acting, executing his command, and then evaluating. And then God finishes all this creativity. And we have by the time it's over, we have what we call nature. And the system is set. The last thing God makes is a human being who has the ability to be creative. And God gave him that ability, and God wants man to be creative, but he wants man to plan, to execute, but afterwards to evaluate and make sure he's doing good, and make sure not to do bad. And then later, God will pick a nation to be the example among the nations of living that type of lifestyle, being creative, planning, doing things well, and making sure what they're doing is good. And then we do it as God's model nation with hope that it'll have an impact on other nations. But that was the theme of Breshit, of Shabbat. Now, the name for God was our key point, because the name for this one God who created everything, when you translate it in Hebrew, it means many gods, because an El is a power, and an Eloha is a power, and therefore, when we talk about other gods, like in the Ten Commandments, Lo yelecha Elohim acharim panah, you can't have other gods. That's the classic pantheon of gods that almost every nation had. Remember, there's the sun god, and every has a moon god, and everybody's got a rain god, and a nature god, and a fertility god, and there's war gods and wind gods. With every power of nature, especially the ones that man need to either help him or not to bring punishment upon him, man needs those gods to work for him. And therefore, all these customs developed of how to get these powers on your side, usually including treating God small g, like humans. If you praise them, talk, say nice things about them, feed them, bring them animals, celebrate in their behalf, then they'll listen to you and they'll answer your prayers. And that's what we call idol worship, IDOL, which was a very logical, understandable custom. Along comes the Bible and says there aren't many gods, there's one God who created all these powers. And if we want those powers to help us, we want rain to come at the right time, like we say in Shema, and our land to give its fruit and produce, etc., and not to have climate problems, not to have wars and things like that. Then we pray to this one God, but not just to pray to that God because he's in charge, but pray to the God knowing that that God who's in charge of all the powers reciprocates based on our behavior. Again, what we say every day in Shema, and basically it's probably the biggest theme in Chumash, when you read all the Tochachot and you say Shema every day, the idea of Hashgacha, what's called divine providence, as a function of our deeds, not just my deeds, but our deeds. Because most reward and punishment in the Bible is on the national level, and therefore it's not how I behave only, but how we behave. And that makes man responsible not only for his own behavior, but for communal behavior, his national behavior, and therefore the need to be involved in society, possibly take leadership, and make sure not only you behave well, but your whole community or your whole nation behaves properly. So that was our quick summary of what the number 7 was about. Why is that important? Because whenever we have something relating to nature and prosperity from the land, and well-being and wealth and food and whatever we need to survive, almost whenever we celebrate those events, it's always going to relate to the number 7. And therefore, don't be surprised that all the holidays revolve around the number 7, 7 days of Chag HaMatzot, remember? 7 weeks from Chag HaMatzot to Shavuot, and then we have the concept of week we celebrate. And then we have 7 days of Chag HaSukkot, and in the 7th month we have all the big holidays, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Of course, 8 comes in there somehow also, but that's not our topic for today. But 7 and nature go hand in hand. All through Chumash, we talked about that briefly last week. All the themes of 7 we had in Breshit beforehand. But as a rule of thumb, when you find 7, it has to do with nature. A mother gives birth to a child, 7 days, on the 8th day, Brit Milah. Whenever there's a tumah from body emissions and things like that, like Zav and Zava, 7 days of tumah. Even a skin disease, Sarat, at least 7 days. Tumat Met, also 7 days. Anything relating to life, death, powers of nature, and it all begins with the story of creation in chapter 1 of Breshit. And therefore, we need constant reminders of who's in charge of all these powers of nature and how that affects our lives, and to make sure that our understanding of God affects our behavior of how we behave in our day-to-day lives. So that was our quick little background. Now, in light of that, let's go now to, where are we? Now we have to go to our source sheet. Here we go back here. And we're going to get to the story of the manna in Sefer Shmot in a minute, in Sefer Shmot chapter 16. But I just want to point out that the first time we have the Shlosh Regalim, which we had a couple of weeks ago in Parshat Mishpatim, it's in the context of all these commandments. Remember, after we get to Torah in actually, maybe I'll show you a different source sheet real fast. This is again, we did this probably a year or two ago when we did Sefer Shmot. Right after the 10 Commandments in Parshat Mishpatim, we have 3 chapters of laws to follow the 10 Commandments. It begins with how to serve God or how not to serve God. And basically, Mizbeach, serve God in a simple matter, with a simple earthen Mizbeach. I don't need gold and silver, etc. And then basically laws of how to serve God in the beginning. Then Seder Mishpatim, laws about laws that go to the court system, laws between man and his fellow man, beginning with how you treat your servant, called it Evet Ivri, etc. And then a whole set of laws of damages called Nezikin. That'll be the first set of laws. Then there'll be a little buffer about, again, not serving other gods, only the right God. And then a whole set of ethical laws that begin with not to mistreat a stranger, and then taking care of the orphan and the widow. Basically, laws that don't go to the court system, but you're responsible because it's the right thing to do, and God will oversee this, but it doesn't go to the court, but it's up to you based on your behavior. And we have all these echoes of the Exodus in all these stories. But basically, 3 chapters of laws between man and his fellow man. And the last section of the whole unit will be the Shlosh Regalim. So in the envelope structure, the Catholic structure of that big three-chapter unit, it begins with how to serve God, or how not to serve God, basically between God and man. It ends with between God and man, the Shlosh Regalim. In the middle, the first section of laws is judicial law that goes to the court system about damages. Then we have a little break about a law, how to serve God and how not to serve God. And then the ethical laws that begin with how to treat a stranger, and then with treating a stranger. Now, I just want to point out where we find Shabbat and the Shlosh Regalim in these laws, because it ends as follows. I'll just translate, because I need the picture here to appreciate it. Again, we end with, again, this law: don't mistreat a stranger, don't cheat him, and don't put pressure on him. You of all people shouldn't do that, because you were strangers in Egypt, etc. I'm sorry. That's how the unit began. And then it ends with, again, returning lost items and things like that. And then midvar sheker terchak, being honest and not taking bribes, and shochad, etc. And then we summarize again: don't oppress and take advantage of a stranger. And you of all people, you of all people knows what it feels like to be a stranger, because you were strangers in Egypt. And then we get Shabbat, and then we get Shemitah, which we talked about already, but we'll return to it not this week, but next week. Then we have 6 years work your land, and the seventh year Shemitah, again, agriculture. And the purpose of Shemitah is for between God and man, so the poor people have what to eat. Then Shabbat, 6 days work, seventh day you rest, not just to remember creation, but to remember to give your workers a day of rest. L'man yanuach, so that your animals or your business works, and your workers have a day of rest, as well as the stranger. And then the big transition line before we get to the Shlosh Regalim. Everything I just told you, keep everything I just told you. Don't you dare mention the names of the other gods. Those are the Canaanite gods, those nature gods, etc., what you mentioned before. Don't let them come out of your mouth. Instead, come to me 3 times a year on the agricultural holidays. Remember, in Chag HaMatzot in the Aviv, in the spring, in Chag HaKatzir, our grain harvest, and our fruit harvest, Chag HaSif, 3 times a year, you come to be seen by God, to remember that God's in charge of your agriculture. Don't go to the other gods. Don't mention those gods, those other gods. Come to your God and remember He's in charge on those critical times of the year, and therefore act accordingly. So that's how we got that same thing we talked about in creation. We have the same idea here, and I have it now highlighted, what we just read, how it ends. 6 days, work your field. This is the end of Parshat Mishpatim again, chapter 23 in Shemot. Rest on the 7th, again, for a reason, not only to remember God, but remember how you have to treat your fellow man, because every human is in God's image. And then a summary: keep these 3 chapters, keep all these laws and these principles. Don't dare mention the names of the other gods. Instead, come to me on the critical times of the agriculture year to remember, if you want God to help your agriculture, you better keep the laws of Parshat Mishpatim and all of its principles. So again, we see Shabbat in the context of having the idea not only who God is, but how He reciprocates to those powers of nature that God's in charge of, why He would use them to help you, and why He would use them to punish you. Now, what I want to point out also, maybe I'll share my chumash for a second, because this was Parshat Shavua. Actually, it dawned on me yesterday. That's why it's not on the source sheet. I was just paying attention to it yesterday in laning. We were in Sefer Shemot, weren't we? Yesterday, in chapter 34. Remember, God announces His attributes of mercy. We're all familiar with. We renewed the covenant, this time with attributes of mercy. After God announces His Hashem Karachum B'Chanun, etc., Moshe quickly bows down and says, if I found favor in your eyes, now travel with us, even though we're stiff-necked people, and forgive us when we sin, because beforehand, a stiff-necked people God could not identify with, and God says, I can't come with you because you're an Am Kshe'arav. Now Moshe asks, now that you've changed your attributes and you can be forgiving, now dwell with us, travel with us, even though we're a stiff-necked people, and forgive us when we sin. And then God answers, He'll make a brit with us based on these new principles. And all the people will see all the miraculous things I'm going to do when I bring you to the land based on this new brit. Now that we have this new brit, God's going to bring us to the land of Israel. So He says, now in light of this, be careful what I'm commanding you. I'm going to help you defeat your enemies. I'm going to help you wipe out the 7 nations. make sure not to make treaties with them because that will lead you to idol worship. Okay? Not only because they're not Jewish, but because pen yelechem lemokesh, there'll be stumbling blocks, they'll lead you away. Instead, get rid of their places of worship, etc. Don't bow down to those other gods, because God will punish you harshly for that. On that case, God won't be forgiving. He'll still be a zealous God. Because if you make treaties with those nations, you'll end up intermarrying and following their gods, and there goes the whole idea of the Jewish people. Okay? Now, then he says, don't make Elohim Asecha. That goes back to what we did wrong with the sin of the golden calf. Instead, on Chag HaMatzot, right, eat matzah for 7 days. Again, don't follow the other gods, the Canaanite gods. Instead, make sure you remember I'm your one God on the 3 critical times of the agricultural year. The Moed Chodesh Aviv, like you said before, because that's when you left Egypt. And then every firstborn, there's not only agriculture, also your cattle. Do something symbolic to remember God. And then we mentioned Shabbat, 6 days you work on the 7th day. And in your Becharish Katzer, when you're harvesting your field or when you're plowing your field, etc., when you're involved in agriculture, right, make sure to remember, take 1 day a week and stop that creativity. Remember man domesticated wheat, and that becomes his main staple. That was man's creativity, came up with the idea of making bread and planting wheat, etc. So you do that 6 days a week. You plow the field and you harvest your field, etc., unique to human civilization. But once every 7 days, take a break from that to remember what to do with your creativity, what you do with your produce, what you do with your wealth, how you manage it. So I need a weekly reminder, and then I need a super duper reminder of the God who's in charge of all the powers of nature in the spring and also on Shavuot, when we bring in our grain harvest. We'll talk about that soon. And also in Chag HaSif, at the end of our fruit harvest. Therefore, 3 times a year, I have massive reminders on the critical times of the agricultural year. And every week, I have my weekly reminder. Because when I'm going to go and take away those nations, take those nations away from you, I'll guard your land so you can come and visit me. And don't worry, come to remember this, and I'll protect your land if you're doing it the right way. And then we have laws about Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot. That's already the end of the parsha. I'm just trying to explain to you what we read last week. Why does Moshe repeat, now that we're coming to the land of Israel, the danger of idol worship is very simple. It's not, I don't think it's more behavioral than theological. It's not believing, having this theological understanding about what God is with Aristotle, etc. Rather, it's the understanding that there's one God in charge of all the powers of nature. And if you want that God to help you, it depends on your behavior, how you build your society. And the danger of idol worship is that it won't lead to good behavior. There'll be no connection. And I'm trying to give a logical reason for ethical monotheism and why the theme of 7 is so critical in Chumash. Because if I really internalize that understanding, if I want food on my table and I want wealth and I want to stay alive and have health and not have war, etc. Because remember, when there's no agriculture, when our crops don't grow, when there's limited food supply, people fight over it. Remember, milchama comes from lechem. We talked about that before. So it's not only agriculture, it's also war. If everyone has plenty, there's less reason for war. I won't prevent war, but there should be less reason. But if man really internalizes that he has to build a just society to be deserving of a healthy economy and healthy agriculture, then that understanding of God will lead to a just society. And then this belief in one God and how he reciprocates and how he judges us is critical for the Torah's goal of what Judaism is about. So that was my main point I wanted to get across. Now, in light of that, now we're ready for the very first Shabbat experience the Jewish people have. And guess what? It's all about food, which has been a Jewish custom. Food at the center of our religion. It's part of our life, and it should be part of Judaism. Not to overdo it, but it's got to be central. Now, even though there's lots of midrashim that the Avot kept Shabbat, etc., I'm not saying they didn't, but it doesn't say that anywhere in Chumash. In the Parshanim it does, and there's nothing wrong midrashically to consider that. But in Pshat, as we read soon, the Jewish people are not aware of Shabbat. Now, they're aware of a new moon because there's new moons. That's part of nature. They're aware of a 24-hour day. And they're aware of the seasonal cycles of the year. Everything on our calendar, the years, the days, the months, are natural. And therefore, every society has them. The concept of a week is it's not a natural cycle in nature. And therefore, we're gonna sort of format our lives in an artificial cycle of days called 7 Day week, which is going to sort of um, put us in control of time instead of time in control of us and relate that to God. Now, the first experience we have is what's called the Mana story, which we're going to read now in chapter 7. Now, let me explain why I'm doing it, what it has to do with Parshat and more. I'll spill the beans and then we'll work backwards. If I go back to my source sheet in Shmot, when we get to chapter 23, we talked about the introduction last week. These are the Moedim, Mikra Kodesh. Remember, we gathered together to remember the themes of our chosenness and our connection to God, taking out for our history and for life and for nature. So therefore, we have Pesach on the 14th of the first month, and then the 15th we have Chag HaMatzot for 7 days. And we gather on the first day, we gather on the last day, we bring a special korban. We'll return to that later on, maybe next week. We'll talk about what's this Vayikra Mishel Hashem, what sacrifice is this, and how it relates to the holidays. Then we have our big topic. Vaydaber Hashem Moshe Lemor. Daber b'nei Yisrael v'amart them. Tell the people of Israel, Ki tavo la'aretz, when you come to the land of Israel, which I'm giving you, to become my nation, and you uksartemek sirah, and you begin to take the harvest, to reap the harvest. Bring Omer, Bevetebet Omer, bring Omer from the beginning of your harvest to the Kohen, and wave this Omer in front of God as you wish, etc., on the day after Shabbat, whatever Shabbat that is, we'll talk about. Now, what's super interesting here is that the word Omer is really strange. I understand we're bringing our grain, but why is this offering called an Omer? Remember, it says, Bevetebet Omer Rishik Sechem El Kohen. We know Sefer, but then we're going to count 7 weeks. In 50 days, we're going to count what's called the Omer. But why is it called Omer? And to show you how complicated it is, look at the English translation. Oh, here it says a sheaf. Other English translation will just say Omer. But the word for a sheep, by the way, there's shibolet, if you know your Chumash. A sheaf of wheat is never called Omer anywhere in Chumash other than here. And we'll see in a minute, and that's about it. Maybe a bundle.
Isn't the amount of
We'll get that. What the word Omer means is really, really tricky. It's a tool. The word Omer is a biblical tool, I think, to teach a lesson. That's the goal. That's why I want to teach you today. How Chumash uses the word Omer. In fact, the story of coming out of Egypt is all a build-up to appreciate this mitzvah of what we call Sefirat Omer and how important it is and how meaningful it is. Now, remember, when we come out of Egypt, we're not ready yet to be God's people. God saved us, from our oppression, but He's hoping that the 6-7 weeks of experiences from the time we leave Egypt until we get to our Sinai will get us ready for becoming His people, accepting the covenant. Remember, we have this attitude problem. We're always complaining. We think we're on a death march. He splits the sea for us. We're wild, and then we don't have water. We complain. We don't have food. We complain, etc. And every time God wants us to complain, He solves our complaint, hoping that we'll be wowed and impressed by God, that we'll be willing to accept His covenant and take that commitment at Har Sinai to be His people. Now, in addition to the big miracles that happen, defeating Amalek and splitting the sea and all the plagues with Egypt, and the magic thing with the water in Marah, etc., there's one day-to-day routine commandment that's going to train them, and that's going to be the story of the manna, and that's the first time we've had the word Omer. The word Omer is only 3 places in Chumash. It's here in chapter 23, during our great harvest. The name of the korban we bring, the offering we bring, is called an Omer. We have it in the story of the manna, and we'll have it one law later in Sefer Devarim. Hopefully we'll get to it today. So what we're going to do now, I'm going to go back now. Actually, it's on my source sheet, I'm sorry. It's right here. I'm going to go to chapter 23, and we're going to read the story of the Omer. Remember, why is it called Omer? So forget everything. We're just going to read the story of what I call the first Shabbat in Jewish history. I should have read the first. I'm sorry, it's right here. My mistake. I'll mention it right now. We're traveling from Elim. Remember Elim? I call that Palm Springs. We have 12 springs and 70 palms. Life is good for a couple of days. But we leave Elim, right? And we go to Midbar Sin. Not Midbar Sin. But Midbar Sin is Bein Elim and Bein Sinai, meaning we're on our way to Mount Sinai. Okay, we're on our way there. Let me make this over a little bit so we can see better. We're on our way to Mount Sinai. And notice the introduction says, Bein Elimu Bein Sinai, again, part of our preparation on our way to Mount Sinai. What day does this event happen? On the 15th day of the second month. It's a month since we left Egypt. And we've run out of food. Remember, the matzah we took, or the dough we took, we finished that already. We're no longer in Elimu. We have date trees and water, etc. Now we're in a place when there's no food. And of course, we're going to complain, because that's what we should do. So the whole nation complains. Notice they complain to Moshe and Aaron. Why'd you bring us there? And listen, the attitude problem. Listen with the people complain to Moshe, and they're sort of blaming Moshe and Aaron for this. If you want us dead, Moses, if God wants us dead, you should let us die in Egypt, right? On a full stomach, B'sira Basar, right? Notice the word Basar here, B'sira Basar, and Bochenu Lechem L'Sova, when we had plenty of bread to eat, plenty of food to eat, because you took us out of Egypt, you took us out here to the desert, Lamit, et Kol HaKazev and Barav. You brought us there to die. They're assuming they're on a death march. And they're just really angry with Moshe and Aaron. Of course, God wants them to complain, and he sees this attitude problem. This miracle now is supposed to help their attitude problem and train them for Har Sinai, as we'll see in a minute. What's God tell Moshe to tell the people? Hineni mamtir lechem lechem min hashamayim. Remember this phrase. God's going to give us matars, anything from heaven to earth, any precipitation from heaven to earth is matar. Gofrit v'melach, remember, by stone, Hashem is mamtir. Anything coming from heaven to earth is called matar. So it's going to rain bread, lechem min hashamayim. In the land of Israel, we have lechem min haaretz. Our blessing that we make on bread is built on this pasuk. But God gives us lechem min hashamayim, as opposed to from the ground. And the people have to go out and collect day by day. And what's the purpose of this manna experience? And this is the key to the whole shir. The purpose of the manna experience is what? Leman anaseno haylech b'toratim lo. This will be a challenging experience. Not a test, but a teaching experience. What they call nisayon. It'll be a difficult experience they're going to go through. That'll train them and check them. Are they ready yet to follow my Torah? They're about to get the Torah at Har Sinai. They're about to get instructions. Can the Jewish people follow a set of laws? And this is our first experience of training. Now, for some reason, the first thing we're told about, getting food every day, we'll get food every day, but on the sixth day, B'yom HaShishi, they have to prepare what they need for the next day, Bechino Shereviu, and Vayam Mishnah, they'll be double, more than they took every day. Part of the month comes with this idea of Friday. I like to call it Good Friday, just so it rings a little nicer. Now, what I want to suggest is there is no Friday yet. It means there's no week yet. In Pshat, no one's keeping a week. There's no reason to keep a week. There's no laws about a week. But it's not on day 6, but on the 6th day, here, on the 6th is here also, on the 6th day, English, on the 6th day of the month falling, then you take double. From the first day the month falls, you take, we'll see as much as you need. Second day, third day, the same thing. On the 6th day, you take double, because the 7th day, you won't have any. And therefore, Moshe and Aaron tell the people, okay, in the evening, you'll know that God took you out of Egypt, not me. Numbers, they complained to Moshe and Aaron. In the evening, it wasn't our idea, it was God's idea. In the morning, you'll see the glory of God, because you heard your complaints, okay? And don't complain about us. God's behind this. Now I'm going to skip the next part I'm going to skip the slav in the evening. There's a big argument whether the slav, the birds, the meat, the basar, came every night or only the first night. The simple understanding is that the first night it came right away to satiate their hunger. And then from then on, they just had man every day until the story later in Balot, when we leave Har Sinai and they ask for meat again. But we're going to focus primarily on the lechem, on the man, because that came every day. Now we'll get the laws of the man. By Dabar Shem Moshe Lemor, I heard the complaint, Shemati Tlon B'nai Yisrael, tell them, Bein Harbaim Tuchlu Basar, in the evening you eat the meat from the slab, Uba Boker Tizbu Lachem. Remember, Basar V'Lechem. Basar in the evening, bread in the morning. And then we know, V'iratem Ki Ani Hashem Elokechem. Remember that phrase we have all through Sefer Vayikra from the second half? Starting from Perik Yudchet, Ani Hashem Elokechem, the refrain all through Parshat Mishpatim, the first line of the Ten Commandments. There's something here which is critical to Mount Sinai. I'm Hashem, your boss. I'm your partner in this covenant between God and the people. But this is training for you to internalize, not just to know theologically, but to understand and internalize that I'm Hashem, your boss. And again, that's going to lead us to Har Sinai. And what I've been teaching on Sefer Vayikra is that understanding of Ani Hashem Elokeichem, I need to, in the first half of Vayikra, I come to the temple to visit God to remember Mount Sinai. The second half, I apply it in my day-to-day life. So how I take that understanding of Ani Hashem Elokeichem will apply it to us in our day-to-day life when we're in the field, when we're managing our wealth, when we're bringing in our food, when we're harvesting our field, and building a society and sharing that wealth. That'll be the application of this idea of Ani Hashem Elokeichem. Right. So in the evening, the Slav came, etc., and then in the morning, we have this dew covering the land, okay, and it's very thin. Now, then we have the famous question: Bnei Yisrael see this strange substance on the ground with the dew, and they ask each other, "What is this, Manu?" Because they didn't know what it was, and therefore they call him. And God says, and Moshe tells them, "Hu alechem." This is the bread, or this is the food that God's giving you to eat, and that's why it's called man, because man means what is it? But something to surprise them. Now, here's the key line. This is the command. This is your training. This is your training experience. Every person take not as much as he wants, as much as he can eat, as much as he needs. We'll see in a minute. Not as much as you want, but as much as you need. Omer la gogolet, an omer per person, based on the number of people in your family. That's how much you bring. Now, the word omer, actually, I'll stop a break here a minute. Let me just have a little fun for a minute. And actually, let me go back real fast and see what it says in English. No, wrong share. My mistake. Open up again. Share my screen. Purposely had English translation this time. Here we go. How do they translate omer? An omer per head. See that? Every English translation you'll find here will just say omer. It won't translate the word because there's no way. It's the first time we have the word in Chumash. There's no way to translate it. Later on, they'll translate it differently. But every English translation translates it a different way. So I'm going to take a break for a minute. We'll play a little game. See if anyone's awake. Ask anybody. Everyone knows Sfirat Omer. Ask anyone counting Sfira, what does the word Omer mean? Ayin Mem Resh. What would they say? Most people have no idea, correct?
The volumetric measure.
What?
Isn't it a measure of volume?
It's a measure of volume, okay. Like, give me an example.
Yeah.
What would that be in English? Give me an example of a dry measure in English.
A pint.
A pint, something like that. Okay, there's a dry measure. That could be a liquid measure, a bushel, and a peck, something like that. Now, in your understanding of Chumash, in your memory, are there any dry measures used for wheat in Chumash anywhere that you can think of?
Oops, Ephah.
The word in the entire Chumash is an ephah.
Yeah.
Ephah is like a bushel of wheat. Now,
Right.
ephah is a lot of wheat, a lot of grain. It's a dry measure. And remember Sefer Dvarim, right before Amalek, we had it. You can have in your home ephah ve'ephah, which means you can have two measures that say the same size, one a little bigger, one a little smaller, and use it for buying and selling. It's called cheating. And Torah doesn't like that. Dry measures are liquid measures, remember? And Evan ve'Evan. Now, a tenth of an ephah in Hebrew is called asiri ephah, right? And there's a word for asiri ephah that's used probably over 100 times in Chumash. It's a metric system. A tenth of an ephah is called an isaron. You said it yesterday in davening, didn't you? Of Yom HaShabbat, shnei chavasim b'nei shana tamimim, shnei esronim solat mincha. Okay? But remember, Rosh Chodesh laning. Shlosha esronim lapar, shnei esronim la'ayu, isron lakeves. The bigger the animal, the more flour. The standard tenth of an ephah. An ephah is a dry measure. The measure that people use in day-to-day life, the amount of wheat that you need per person per day is about an isaron. It never says omer. You follow? The word omer is never used for a measure through Chumash. It's always an isaron. We'll have it one time in Devarim, we'll see. But it's not a measure.
But in the Mun story, at the end of the story, there's that one line. Oh, and yeah,
we'll get to that line. Yeah, it's not a line, it's a footnote. Okay. We'll see the footnote in a minute. Now, We'll get to there. Now, what else? Ask people what else does Omer mean? What else do people say it means? You can ask Google.
Barley. They might say
What?
barley.
People might say barley, but there's a word in Hebrew for barley called sorah. Right? What else might they say? It might be a sheaf, but there's a word for sheaf in Hebrew. It's called a shibolet, right? And a bundle of sheaves is called an aluma. Ask Yosef's brothers. Right? He's raving about that. We never use the word omer for that, or rarely. We'll see. There might be one exception for a good reason. But there's other words in Hebrew for barley, for bundles, for sheaves, etc. The word omer here is special. Got that? It's a unique word. It's important that it's unique. It's only used in this context. We'll see that. If it's used later, it'll relate to this story. Now, now we'll go to the pasuk that you mentioned. At the end of the story, at the end of the chapter, sometimes Chumash has what I like to call endnotes. I can't say footnotes because there aren't footnotes in Chumash because they didn't have word processors back then. The last line of the story is as follows. The Omer is a tenth of an ephah. See that in verse 36? Now, what does that mean? Okay. So it sounds like it's a measure, but that's an isaron. Now, it says earlier, we'll see, when they took the Omer, it says by a moda Omer. They measured with the Omer. Now, I'm going to give you an example. I'll stop my share for a minute. We'll do a little show and tell. This is a hard question. What am I holding? I'm holding a cup, right? I'm holding a cup. Now, what am I holding?
A cup.
A cup.
Oh.
2 cups, okay? It's like Dr. Seuss. 1 cup, 2 cups, 1 big cup going up. I mean, 1 small cup going down if you read books to your children. Okay. Now, if I go to Starbucks and ask for a cup of coffee, what are they going to ask me?
How big?
Medium, large.
If I know Italian.
Yeah, grande or
So
vente.
I'll go to not there, what's it called? Dunkin' Donuts or 7-Eleven, a lot cheaper. Okay. They speak English there, right? Small, medium, large, got it? 8 ounce, 12 ounce, 10 ounce. Now, sometimes a cup is the name of a utensil. Agree? So when I say this is a cup of, actually it's tea, and this is a cup, it's a water, but it's a utensil, but this holds, I think, 10, 12 ounce, 11 ounces, and this holds 8 ounces, okay? But the word cup is for both. If I'm baking a cake that calls for a cup of flour, that's a measure. So sometimes the word cup can be a measure. Sometimes it can be a utensil, depending on the context. Now, if I understand like human life, if you go out once a day in the morning to collect all the man I need for the day, I need to put it in something. Got it? I can't put it in my pockets. I need a container to collect it in. So what I want to suggest is the name of the containers. Now, where they got it from Amazon. I don't know who has produced them, but everyone had a. If you ever did army back in World War II or early in the 70s in Israel, you got a mess kit in the army. I don't know if people our age remember, maybe in movies. A mess kit is like a thing, a metal thing. You had to wash it, but when you went to get your food, you took your mess kit and you put in there your mashed potatoes, your grub, whatever you got, and then you had to wash it and clean it. But it was a little container, all the exact same size. How much food you put in, you put as much as you need. So I think the Omer, it's not critical for the shir, it's just in shot. I think the Omer is the name of the utensil they used to put it in. Now, it's not a measuring cup, it's a utensil to put it in. Now, the size of this was a tenth of an ephah. That's the most anyone could need. But you put less than that. I'll prove it to you later on why it has to be. An Omer is the name of the utensil. Its size was a tenth of an ephah. That was its volume, okay? You put into it as much as you need. And then with that understanding, everything will make sense now. And I won't need a miraculous explanation that I'm following Ibn Ezra as opposed to Rashi and what happened. Okay, keep that in mind, and we'll see how important it'll be in a minute. Hope that made sense so far?
Yeah.
Now, let's go back to our source sheet and read what happened. Okay, and what's Moshe say? Ish al yutamid, no leftovers, okay? They didn't listen to Moshe. And what happened? People took too much and what do you call it? They hoarded, call it kiddush mode. You take it more than you need. Got it? And then what happens? It gets
It It got wormy.
Yeah, it got wormy. Like food gets ruined after a day. It got wormy, and basically, what did they learn? It doesn't pay to hoard. Now, the main mitzvah is not finishing your plate. Got it? The main idea is not to have leftovers. The main idea is take as much as you need. And for people who took too much, they learned the lesson the hard way. It didn't pay to hoard. That's it. Okay. Now, but remember the word leket. It's like to glean. But every day remember the word leket. Will come up later. Remember the word leket will come up again. I'm pretty sure it's probably 7 times in the story or 14. I forget the count, but it's one of those two. It's a milah mancha in the story here. Every morning, ish t'kfi okay, as much as they needed. And it said also beforehand here, and on Friday they took double. Okay, and when they took double on Friday, here, remember what happened on Friday? People started complaining, hey, how come everyone's taking double? And they come and complain to Moshe Rabbeinu, the people in charge. And Moshe tells them, Hu asher diber Hashem Shabbat Shabbaton Kodesh Hashem Machar. Hey, tomorrow is a big special day. That was welcome to Shabbos. Why? Because on Shabbos, what happened? Prepare on Friday for Saturday. Okay. Right. And then what happened? And then sure enough, they left over from Friday to Shabbos, and it didn't get wormy. And that proved to them that God's behind all this. If the man fell the same amount every day, that's that they call it. Remember, a miracle happens every day. It's called nature. But if once a week it doesn't fall, got it? Remember, on Shabbos, it's not that you can't take on Shabbos. On Shabbos, it didn't fall, but you always had to go outside the camp to take it. You had to get up in the morning and walk out to take it. So if they took double on Friday, Saturday, they maybe even more. On Saturday, they went out the first time. What happened?
Nothing.
Nothing was there. We'll read the story now in a minute. Now, what do you learn? Like again, Pavlov's dog. It doesn't pay to go out. It doesn't pay to go out to take on Shabbat because you're not going to find anyhow. It would be a harder test if it was out there and you couldn't take. But this is an easy test. You find out the hard time the first time. Okay. That's a great Zemer if you want to remember. Ki Shabbat Hayom Hashem. There's a Zemer built on that. Don't be mad. See the pattern? Glean it 6 days a week. On the 7th day, don't touch it. That's the pattern of Shabbat. Remember, etc. Okay? And what happened on the 7th day? People went out to collect, and they didn't find. Next week, they stayed home and read the paper. Okay. Then God gets angry. Remember, I'm teaching you a lesson. Understand, remember? God's giving you Shabbat. Okay, and that's why he's giving you double on Friday. Okay? And then we learn what's called Shvita from here. Stay home on Shabbat. Go to shul, but don't go out to work. Don't leave your makom on the 7th day. And then from then on, and which is amazing, ever since that day, every 7 days has been Shabbat for 4,000 years. Isn't that amazing? Now, based on this story, what is the first Shabbat in Jewish history? What day of the month was it? Let me do the math real fast with you. Do the math. In other words, what was the first day the manna fell? Remember, when did we arrive in Midbar Sin?
The second month.
On the 15th day. The 15th day of the second month, we arrived. They complained. That night, we got the Slav. The next morning, we got the man. So the first day that we got manna was the 16th of the second month. The 16th day of the month was the first day the manna fell. And I have a great joke I play with my little students. Okay. What day of the week is that?
Sunday.
The first day the manna fell.
Should
That's
be
the
Sunday.
first Sunday in Jewish history, isn't it? The first Sunday, what we call Sunday, the first Yom Rishon, is the 16th of Iyar. Got it? Why was that Sunday? Because what fell on that day? The man. So Phil, the first Sunday was no one got the
It's a
joke?
Monday.
It's a Monday. Okay?
Very good, very good.
That's the way my 18-year-olds understand it. The first Sunday was a Monday. Now do the math. What was the first Good Friday? What day of the month was it?
Friday.
Without a calculator. See if you can do that.
21.
29?
21 was the first Friday in Jewish, the first Friday. And the first Shabbos was the 22nd of Iyar. Got it?
Yep.
22nd of Iyar was the first Shabbat in Jewish history. Now, what's that going to mean? Did they keep it? No. Okay.
No.
The next Shabbat was the 29th. I show up, they kept it, okay? The next Shabbos was the 36th. Oh, there's no 36. Oh. So what was the next Shabbos? It's the next month. Well, it depends how many days the year was. It could have been 29 or 30. Therefore, the next Shabbos was either the 6th or 7th of Sivan.
Oh, wow.
Does that remind you of something?
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
Shabbat.
Yeah,
What's the
Shabbat.
Torah given on Shabbat? The Gemara tells you. Everyone agrees Torah was given on Shabbat. Was it given on the 6th or the 7th? It's a machloket. That the rabbis talk about it. But everyone agrees it was given on Shabbat. It's in your prayer service also on Shabbat. In fact, we kept 2 Shabbatot in a row. We got the Torah. Imagine if we did it again. Remember the Midrash about keeping 2 Shabbatot in a row? See, now, work backwards. All Jewish dating of the week is working backwards from here. We left Egypt Thursday night, if you remember. Remember? No, this is the first week. All Jewish dating in Chazal is all rooted here. But it's amazing. Ever since now, the 22nd of Iyar, the first year coming out of Egypt, whatever the year was, something BC, whatever it was, we've been keeping Shabbat every 7 days. Doesn't make a difference. New moon, old moon, Julian calendar, Gorgian reform, whatever it might be, Minyan Shtarot, you name it. Every 7 days has been Shabbat. Is that amazing? It's pretty cool.
Amazing.
It has nothing to do with the moon. It has to do every day, 7 days. And we have this routine. And it got viral, didn't it? Every other religion, it's a good thing because it has to do with food. It's a great minhag. Now, can a non-Jew keep Shabbat? That's a great discussion for later. And we're running out of time. Oh my gosh, I agree how late it was. So that's the Mana story. Now, the question is, what's the purpose of this event? So again, before I get any farther, the word Omer, let me get my proof. I'm jumping ahead way too fast. To make sure we remember this and to show how connected this is to Mount Sinai, this is a footnote later, this is part of the footnote. God tells Moshe tells Aaron, Zeh davar shirtzi b'Hashem, melo ha'omer mimeno l'mishmeret. What's melo ha'omer? Remember? I need a full cup. Understand? If an omer is a measure, fill it to the top. Can it? Keep it for safekeeping. So the people will see this bread that I gave them in the desert to come out of Egypt. And then God tells Moshe as follows. Moshe tells Aaron, Kach tzintzeret tachar. A tzintzeret is a closed container. A tzintzeret, an omer is an open container. It's a mess kit. Understand? It's open. So I take an omer full to the top and put it into a tzintzeret, which is a closed container. V'tein shama b'lo omer man, and put it lifnei Hashem l'mishmeret l'dorotechem. Lifnei Hashem, that's in front of the Aron. In the Kodesh Kodashim is a little container of man, which reminds us of what? Not just of our desert experience, of our training to receive the Torah, of taking as much as you need. And as God commanded Moshe Rabbeinu, and that's what Aaron did. Of course, he did this much later after they built the Mishkan. And to prove this is a footnote at the end of the story. This has to be in the 40th year. And then Chumash tells us, Bnei Yisrael ate the man for 40 years until they came to the land of Israel. Until they came to Eretz Canaan. Now, what does Chumash tell us? Beautifully. When we come to the land of Israel, I'll go back to the man part in a minute, what it means. When we come to the land of Israel, look how beautiful Parshat Emor is now. Oh, it's back to my Chumash. You know what? I'll do it in a Chumash here. So we have English translation. Where are we? There and Leviticus. Here we go. Leviticus 23. What are we told in chapter 23? God tells Moshe Rabbeinu, tell Bnei Israel, when you come to the land of Israel that I'm giving you, and uksatev ksira, when you bring your grain, remember your grain harvest begins in April and ends in June, 2 months a year, which has to last through the whole year. Now, whatever the word Omer now is unique to this story, but it has to relate to the manna. Yeah. And then you wave the Omer to God the day after Shabbat, which is on what day of the month in our tradition? On the 16th of Nisan, right? On the 16th, why the rabbis take on the 16th and not on a Sunday? Because Shabbat is also, the first day of Chag HaMatzot is also a Shabbat. Because you don't do work, we don't do Malacha on the first day of Yom Tov. I think the rabbi's understanding is better than the Tzukim. When you understand this. Okay, that's a different topic. Now, but isn't Pshat the simplest thing? What are we telling God? We're beginning our grain harvest. Now that grain harvest in the land of Israel has to last us a whole year but we only harvest grain for 2 months a year. And that's critical for our survival. If the grain harvest is bad, we'll starve. Now, if we have an important family, we can go to Egypt like my great-grandparents did. There's a whole book about them. Whenever there was a famine in Canaan, they went down to Egypt. But you can't move the whole nation there. And if the grain harvest is bad, people starve, become ill, people fight over it. There'll be wars, etc. And therefore, people did anything to make sure the grain harvest would be good. Who do they turn to? The grain god, Dagon, the fertility god, Asherah, went to the Baal, whoever they turn to. And God's saying, come to me. And remember, who's in charge of your bread? God. And who gave you bread the first time in the desert? Who trained you? God, by giving you Omer. Remember, I'm using the word Omer because it reminds me of the man experience. And what am I telling God? Even though I'm harvesting it all myself, I'm planting my wheat, I'm harvesting it, I'm doing all the work, I'm going to treat it as though it's lechem min hashamayim. But when I eat that bread, I'm going to make a bracha al lechem min haaretz. The rabbis say, what bracha do they make on the man? Hamotzi lechem min hashamayim. That's a beautiful midrash. But our bracha, hamotzi lechem min haaretz, comes from here. So, in the most simplest explanation, why is Chumash using the word Omer for this offering or waving? We're waving it like a trophy to show how important it is. We're making a statement as a nation that even though we're working it ourselves, and I could take the credit, I could say Kol Chibot Yadi, which we'll have to get to next week, because we won't get to speaking today. I could say I did it. No, I'm giving all the credit to God, even though I'm doing it. And for the whole 7 weeks of my grain harvest, what am I going to do? What am I going to talk about every day?
Oh, man.
Yeah. This is before there were movies, remember? You can't go to. Before you can't have weddings. Before you can't have... What else can't you do? Can't buy new clothes. You feel guilty listening to music. Remember all the...
Haircut.
This is way before then. In the land of Israel, Omer made a lot of sense. Before Rabbi Akiva even. It was a critical time of the year for our produce. And therefore, remembering the theme of Har Sinai and the theme of preparation. Now, the question is, the main point I wanted to get across was why the Chumash uses the word Omer, and why are we counting weeks? For God's sake. I hope you get my pun. For the sake of God, I'm connecting, I'm counting weeks on purpose. And I'm calling the holiday weeks. Remember? Because that's the theme. I'm celebrating the concept of a week and the idea of God behind nature. If I didn't have Calvin appreciate, I wouldn't appreciate how awesome the holiday is and how fundamental it is and how educational it is and transformative it should be if you're living in an agricultural society. Because if I really believe that the outcome of my grain harvest is a function of keeping the laws of Parshat Mishpatim and keeping the Torah, then it would make sense. Now, before I forget, I want to jump to the end here. We have all these laws, and Chumash likes to repeat itself. I'll do it right here. Okay? We have all the laws of Shvirat Omer, counting 7 weeks. We have to do the Korban later on. That's after 50 weeks, after the 50th day. Mikor Kodesh, we have a holiday, don't do work. Chukat Olam. And then, out of nowhere, we have the final pasuk. We finish Shavuot. When you're harvesting your field, don't take the entire field. No, don't harvest your entire field. Leave over a payah, leave over a corner. And don't take everything when you're gathering your bundles, right? Leave over the sheaves, etc. And instead, what do? Don't hoard the whole field. Leave over for the poor. And guess what? Ani Hashem Elokechem. Now, we had that before, didn't we? In case you forgot. Remember Kedoshim to you? It started this whole unit. Remember back in chapter 19? Kedoshim to you, etc. In the first half of Ani Hashem Elokechem, what do we have here? Here. We're in chapter 19. Remember Kedoshim to you? Okay. We have the 10 Commandments, don't we? Don't turn other gods, etc. Then we have okay, that's our law for grain harvest. Also, your fruit harvest later in the year, your grapes and your from your fruit. Again, again, Ani Hashem Elokechem. And that ended the first section, the 4 Ani Hashem Elokechems. Then we get to the second half of the Dibrot. And that's the transition. But you can't miss, how's Chumash ending? The purpose of Sefer Omer It's not just remembering it's from God. It's not saying thank you and acting thank you. And then during these 7 weeks, what do we need to do? As we're harvesting our field,
We're bringing
don't hoard.
honor.
Take as much as you need. Leave over the rest for people who don't have. There's a whole Megillah about it called
Yeah,
Ruth, which we read on what holiday?
yeah,
On Shavuot. Makes all perfect sense now, doesn't it? Now, what I want to share with you is the question. I want to end with this, and we'll have to probably finish this next week. What's the main mitzvah of the Omer? Of the, is it faith in God? No, it's a test. Remember, it's a test. It's taking as much as you need, a sign that I believe that God will provide for you tomorrow. No, is that the sign that I can sit back and God will provide for me as long as I believe in God? Right? Or is it beinam l'chavero? Understand? Taking as much as you need. Is that a sign of my belief in God that He'll provide for me? That's one very popular approach. Or is it to train you other people exist? Because imagine if everyone's starving. Let's say there's a place there's no food. And all of a sudden, they start dropping humanitarian aid from the sky. Got it? And it comes down. Is everyone going to wait in line and share it and divide it easily? Or is everyone going to hoard and kill each other over it? No? In normal people, it'll happen. If there's a limited amount of food, people fight over it. I call it kiddush mode. But that's easy, but it gets worse in real life. Okay? For everyone to take as much as you need when there's a limited supply, you follow? Because other people exist. It's training people to take as much as they need is critical because that's how we train ourselves to become God's people. No, it's not only beinam l'makom, it's beinam l'chavero. What's my proof? In Sefer Devarim, go back to the source sheet, we have the word Omer one more time in Chumash. Oh, here, all the way at the end. One more time in Chumash in Sefer Devarim. What's it saying? When you're harvesting your field, Shachachta Omer called Shichacha, if in case you forgot what that law was. The Shachachta Omer Basadeh, the only other time we have the word Omer. Okay? Don't go back and collect it. Leave it for the orphan, the widow, and the stranger. So God and then God will bless you. It was what I leave over for the poor person. It was usually leftover grain is called sorah, chita, whatever you're doing. But it says leave over. What you leave over is called Omer. Understand? Now the next time in Chumash, next time in Mitrach you have the word is then guess what in Megillat Ruth? Because guess what she's collecting? Omarim. Remember? She's collecting the leftovers. But again, it's rarely in Chumash. It's in. If I have time, I'll show you later on. The few times that we have it, it's always in this context. So what I'm getting at is that preparation for Ma'amad Har Sinai is not only belief that God is there and He provides for you, but that when He does provide for you, take as much as you need. It's called wealth management. Now, let me explain how this explains Shabbat. If I can only take as much as I need, why is it okay to hoard on Friday?
Because you need it. You need it for tomorrow.
Because I'm not, taking double sometimes is what you need. So what can you hoard? You can hoard when you need to hoard.
Yeah,
So that's easy. In the land of Israel, it's complicated. Why? Because during my grain harvest, I can't take as much as I need day by day. Why not? Because I need for a whole year. Right? So in my grain harvest, due to the nature of the land of Israel, I have to hoard. Got it? Understand? I have to because I need that for the whole year. And maybe next year in case there's a famine. So during my grain harvest, what do I have to do? I have to hoard. Now, who doesn't have, the landowner has to do that. How about people who don't own land? How about the ger, the yatom, the amana, etc.? Understand? There's a whole Megillah about that. What are they dependent on? On the kindness of those harvesting their field. And therefore, it's called wealth management. What's God tell you to do? Even though you have every reason to hoard, still remember there's other people. And therefore, you have to manage that. How much? Up to you. Some people have a beautiful custom to mumble something when they make Birchas HaTorah in the morning. And then we quote something from Chumash and something in a Mishnah. What's Mishnah do we quote in Limud HaTorah? Eilu Dvarim She'en Lehem Shiur. The first example, Pe'ah. I can't quantify tzedakah. You follow? How much do you leave over? You decide. Called Jewish guilt. How much lechet? As much as you have to remember to forget to leave over. You can't quantify tzedakah in every stage of your process of when you gather the first bundle. If a sheep falls over, leave it over. When you're gathering your bundles That's the verb. That's called when you can your bundles in the field and bring them to the. If a bundle falls off, leave the bundle over. Understand? And then don't harvest your whole field. Leave over payah. It's not just one amount. Every step of the process during every moment of your grain harvest, I'm doing a mitzvah. On the back of my mind is leaving over for less fortunate people. Now, how to apply that in non-agricultural society? That's a challenge of Chumash. It's called wealth management. You need to hoard, and you need wealth. You need capital growth. But when you're doing it, how much you share that with others, and how do you balance that? It's up to us. That's a big challenge. And sometimes you need to hoard because you need long-term investments. You need to build schools. You need. Chumash is not against wealth, but it's wealth management. So you sort of become like a trustee. Anyway, so that's going to be one of the key themes of Mamad Har Sinai. But I'm getting the background. Why the law of Shabbat, our first training that it's okay to hoard, but hoard as much as you need. I need to remember that during my grain harvest, because there it's much more difficult. And therefore I have to evaluate myself. And that's the challenge of being Jewish. And that's why I'm not just remembering the Omer, I'm counting weeks, not just days. I'm talking about Omer every day and remembering the theme of creation and all these things. And it takes it right back to Doshim to you, because Ani Hashem Elokechem, I chose you in Har Sinai to be your boss, to be a nation representing God. So how do Jewish people need to be wealthy, right? But need to manage their wealth and use that wealth to help others. Right? That whole theme of Jewish philanthropy. Again, how to do it, there's no laws exactly how much you follow. There's guidelines maybe, but in them, sure. But that's up to us. But the message behind it, the key is how to apply that in day-to-day life. And it's not just about when you count the Omer that you can't buy new clothes and can't have weddings, and that's a different reason with Rabbi Akiva. But counting Omer is so important if you understand where it's coming from. And it's the same thing relates to Shabbat. The whole idea of Shabbat is the same idea. And why the word Shabbat is so central in this law. Why is it Mechrat HaShabbat? God didn't tell us, God left that to us what day to pick. We'll talk about that next week, how the rabbis understood why it's the first day of Chol Hamoed Pesach. But that's the key idea behind it. That's the idea of Omer. Again, we have a lot more to do here. I guess we'll have to continue this next week. It'll be part 3 already of Omer. But it's all preparation for the holiday season coming up. Because it's already, the worst thing about Purim is that it's only a month before Pesach. It's like the worst.
Less than that.
Less than that even, yeah. Okay. Anyway, any real quick questions?
How did
Yeah.
you say that Lechem is related to Nechama?
Excuse me?
Did you say that Lechem and Nechama have a connection?
No, Lechem in Milchama.
Oh,
Nechama.
Nechama, okay.
Milchama, like
Okay.
when there's no Lechem, you fight over it.
Mm.
Right.
Lechem, a soldier is called a Lochem.
Uh-huh.
It begins with Lechem, because that's what causes war. Before religion got into the equation. Before people started manipulating religion for power plays and things like that. But people fought for a good reason over limited supplies of food. But they got so used to fighting, and then they had enough food, so they have to fight over values and things like that, and over politics. But that's our class enrolled history already.
Menachem,
Yeah, sure.
next, I don't know if you're going to do this next week or not. The use of leket, that word, and the verb tilakate and leket, that's the word for collecting the mun. And it's the verb that's used for when
Like
you
it for sure.
harvest.
Yeah.
Leket. So when we harvest our fields, we have to remember we were all poor people at one time,
Yeah.
collecting the
Like it is so,
mun.
and the opposite is Osef, right? Remember,
Yeah.
we'll get to that story later in chapter 11 of Bamidbar with Asaf Suf. Remember, Itavu Tava, and Asaf. Remember, and the word Lesof. That's the word play there. It's Leket is supposed to us as Lesof. Now, later, I'll explain later the holiday of Sukkot. It gets really, we'll get to it all of them more. Again, we'll do it for sure next week. But that's what we call the Manashir. But it's like real basic to Shabbat, to Judaism, to creation. And it's not just, I'm just trying to explain that when we count the Omer, it's not this little technical mitzvah, to remember to count, to do it without a bracha. We compart, again, I'm not going against that, but when you study the Chumash behind it and the theme behind it, it's such an important mitzvah that you just can't leave it as, do I make a bracha before sunset, after sunset? Did I forget? Did I count the weeks? Or it's la Omer, ba Omer. It's all important, but it's thing. Now, what's really awesome is that the morning we do is because of Talmidei Rabbi Akiva who died. Remember? Bakov wrote. And what did the rabbis say? Shalom Nagud. That was So lo nogud kavod zibazeh. That was they the reason for the punishment was because they didn't internalize that message of Omer, which is really deep, but that's for Shalashudas. Okay, we have to stop here. Was at the end. Okay, any announcements, Rabbi?
Just that Benny's class, which is going to follow Israel time. In other words, 2 p.m. Eastern. He's going to keep with all the other classes are going to be on Eastern time. They don't change the clock in Israel for another 3 weeks. So this week, next week, our Pesach, our Haggadah Yom Ha'Yom, which is 2 weeks of today. So all the times in Israel we're going to keep, Eastern time, like 11:15, like we did for now. But Benny's class is going to be at 2 p.m. That's it. So tomorrow, Tzvi Grummet will be at 1 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. in Israel. And okay, then we'll have all our regular classes this week, next week. And as I just alluded to, March 22nd, we'll have our Haggadah Yom Ha'Yom. Looks like we'll have 7 speakers back to back to back to back to back. How many backs there are? And that'll be 9:15 Eastern starting. So that's our
Rabbi JK, tell them my joke. Yeah.
I don't know which joke. I don't know which one. Which
He
joke?
gave you a list of topics to choose from. So
Right.
there was between 12 and 12:15, we said break.
Oh yeah. That wasn't bad.
Yeah,
That wasn't
I thought
bad.
that was a Shran Yachatz.
The times are probably going to switch a bit, right? I put in a breaks. So I don't know if that's to speak for Yachatz, right? But okay, you want to speak on Yachatz?
No, I took.
I know that you do.
Yeah.
Yeah. You want to do what do you want to do? You wanted to do. I forget now already. I wrote it
doing
down.
Yocham Rosh Chodesh.
Yachom Rosh Chodesh, right.
Which is Visham Dal Avotenu and everything. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, very good. Okay, everybody, let's play to hear good news, and everybody be well. Shavua Tov. I don't know what it's like here, but wow, we have grass for the first time in 2 months. It was hit 15 degrees yesterday, Celsius. So.